I'm Tom, and the night I found myself trapped in a dimly lit elevator was the longest, most harrowing experience of my life. It all began when I decided to take a late-night trip to my office, a decision that would lead to a battle for survival I never saw coming. I had been working late into the night, lost in a whirlwind of spreadsheets and deadlines. My stomach growled, a reminder that it was well past dinner time, and I decided to head to the office kitchen for a snack. The elevator was the quickest way down to the ground floor. As I stepped into the empty elevator, I felt a sudden jolt, and then the lights flickered and went out. Panic surged through me as the elevator shuddered to a halt. I pressed the buttons frantically, but nothing happened. I was stuck. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in on me, and my heart pounded in my chest. I reached for my phone to call for help, but to my horror, I realized it had slipped from my pocket and was now out of reach. Lying on the floor just beyond the elevator doors, hours passed, and my initial panic turned into desperation. I tried prying the doors open with my bare hands, but they wouldn't budge. The elevator remained motionless, suspended between floors. My phone taunted me from the floor, just out of reach. With each passing minute, the air grew thinner, and the temperature dropped. I could see my breath in the dim light filtering through the narrow gap between the doors. Fear gnawed at me, and I realized that I might not make it out of this situation alive. I thought about the people I loved, the life I had yet to live. Tears welled up in my eyes as I faced the possibility that I might never see them again. But I couldn't give up, not yet. I had to find a way out. My mind raced, and I remembered a scene from an action movie where the hero used his belt to climb out of a similar situation. I took off my belt and looped it around the edge of the elevator door, pulling myself up with every ounce of strength I had left. It was agonizing, but I inched closer to my phone. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to hook the belt around my phone and pulled it closer. With trembling hands, I dialed 911, my voice a desperate plea for help. They assured me that they were dispatching a rescue team, but it would take time. As I waited for rescue, the minutes turned into hours. The elevator became colder, and my strength waned. I clutched my phone, praying for the sound of approaching footsteps. But in the eerie silence, all I could hear was the slow, rhythmic thudding of my own heart. Just when I was beginning to lose hope, I heard a faint sound from above. It was the sound of voices, distant but growing closer. Relief washed over me as the rescue team arrived, prying open the doors and flooding the elevator with blinding light. I stumbled out of the elevator, weak and trembling, into the arms of the rescue team. They assured me that I would be okay, that I had survived my ordeal. As I looked back at the now open elevator doors, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude for the simple gift of freedom. That night changed me in ways I could never have imagined. It taught me the value of life, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of hope in the face of despair. I vowed never to take the everyday moments for granted, knowing that in the darkest of hours, even the simplest things can become the most precious. I'm Alex, and the night my friends and I found ourselves trapped in a darkened elevator was a harrowing ordeal I'll never forget. It began as a carefree outing, a night filled with laughter and camaraderie, but it would end in terror and loss. It was a typical Friday evening, and my friends and I decided to celebrate the end of a long workweek with a night out on the town. We headed to a fancy downtown restaurant for dinner, and then hit a few bars for drinks. As the clock ticked toward midnight, we found ourselves in high spirits. The night filled with the promise of adventure. It was during our tipsy laughter and careless chatter that we decided to take the elevator to the rooftop bar of a nearby skyscraper. The idea of an exclusive, panoramic view of the city at night was too tempting to resist. We crowded into the elevator, a group of 7 friends, all talking and joking as the doors closed. But as we ascended, an ominous silence descended. The elevator jerked, shuddering to a sudden halt. Panic set in as we exchanged worried glances. "What just happened?" I asked, my voice shaky. No one had an answer. The elevator remained suspended between floors, its interior plunged into darkness as the overhead lights flickered and died. An eerie silence settled over us, broken only by the faint hum of the machinery. Initially, we tried to keep our spirits up, joking about the situation and making light of the inconvenience. But as the minutes stretched into hours, the humor drained away, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Our cell phones offered little help. No signal, no bars, just dead screens. It was as if we had been cut off from the world, isolated in a metal box that seemed to be swallowing us whole. Hours turned into an agonizing eternity. We grew hungry, thirsty, and exhausted. The air grew thick, making it difficult to breathe. Panic gave way to despair, and I could see the fear in my friends' eyes. Then, one by one, they began to fade. The lack of food and water, the oppressive darkness, and the relentless fear took its toll. They lost hope, their strength waning until they could no longer stand. I watched in helpless horror as one after another, they succumbed to unconsciousness. I tried to shake them awake, to revive them with words of encouragement, but they were lost in a seemingly endless slumber. I was left alone, trapped in the darkness, my friends unconscious around me. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, threatening to crush my spirit. But I refused to give in. I knew I had to find a way out, for myself and for them. I remembered the emergency hatch above the elevator. With renewed determination, I climbed onto the shoulders of my friends and reached for the hatch. With each desperate attempt, my fingertips brushed against it, but I couldn't get a firm grip. Hours passed, my strength waning, but I refused to give up. Finally, with a surge of adrenaline and sheer willpower, I managed to pry the hatch open. Cold air rushed in, and I pulled myself through the narrow opening, emerging onto the top of the elevator. With trembling legs, I climbed down the elevator's exterior and reached the floor below. I found help and returned with a rescue team. They revived my friends and carried them to safety, but the ordeal had taken a toll on their minds and bodies. As I stood there, reunited with my friends, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet relief. We had survived, but we had also lost a part of ourselves in that suffocating darkness. In the days that followed, we tried to make sense of what had happened. The elevator malfunction had been a freak accident, an unfortunate twist of fate. But the memory of that night, of the friends who had fallen into a deep slumber, haunted us. And then came the twist. As we sat together, trying to move on from the trauma, one of my friends, Sarah, shared a chilling dream she had experienced while unconscious in the elevator. In her dream, she had seen a shadowy figure, a presence that had whispered to her, urging her to let go, to surrender to the darkness. The dream sent shivers down our spines. It was as if something sinister had been lurking in that elevator with us, something that had wanted to claim our souls. And I couldn't help but wonder, had I been the only one to escape the clutches of whatever malevolent force had trapped us that night? The memory of those hours spent in the elevator, the relentless darkness, and the friends who had fallen into an inexplicable slumber would forever haunt us. It was a night we would never forget, a descent into darkness that had left us forever changed. I'm Mike, and the night I found myself trapped in a dimly lit elevator was a test of endurance I never anticipated. It all started with a simple ride to my apartment after a late-night shift, but it would turn into a night of isolation, uncertainty, and a battle against time. As I stepped into the elevator, my fatigue weighed heavily on my shoulders. It had been a long day at work, and all I could think about was the comfort of my bed. But as the doors closed, there was a sudden jolt, followed by an ominous grinding noise. The elevator lurched to a halt, and panic surged through me. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, and then went out, plunging me into absolute darkness. My heart pounded in my chest, and my palms grew clammy. I pressed the buttons frantically, but nothing happened. The elevator was stuck, and there was no way out. My first instinct was to call for help. I reached for my phone, but to my dismay, I realized it had run out of battery. Panic set in as I realized the gravity of my situation. I was alone, trapped in a pitch-black elevator, with no means of communication. The minutes ticked by, stretching into an agonizing hour. The air grew stale and stuffy, making it increasingly difficult to breathe. I leaned against the cold metal walls, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. How had I ended up in this nightmare? I tried to stay calm, reminding myself that someone would surely notice the malfunctioning elevator soon. But as the hours dragged on, my hope began to wane. The isolation was suffocating, and the darkness seemed to close in around me. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, and I sank to the floor, my back against the elevator wall. There was no way to tell the time, but I knew it was well past midnight. The thought of spending the entire night trapped in this metal box filled me with dread. I tried to distract myself, replaying old memories in my mind, singing songs softly to myself, anything to keep the fear at bay. But as the night wore on, my resolve began to crumble. The hours dragged by like an eternity, and despair settled in. The temperature inside the elevator dropped, and I shivered in the darkness. I wished I had brought a jacket or a blanket, anything to ward off the cold. My stomach growled, a reminder that I had missed dinner. Thirst gnawed at me, but there was no water to be found. I clung to the hope that someone would rescue me soon, that the morning light would bring an end to my ordeal. But as the minutes turned into hours, that hope began to fade. The isolation was maddening, the darkness unrelenting. At some point, fatigue got the better of me, and I must have drifted into a fitful sleep. I was jolted awake by the sudden sensation of movement. The elevator shuddered and groaned, and then, with a jarring lurch, it began to ascend. Relief flooded through me as I realized I was on my way out. The doors finally opened, and I stumbled out into the corridor, blinking in the harsh light of morning. It was a janitor who had found me, the first person to notice my absence. I thanked him profusely, my voice hoarse from hours of silence. He called the maintenance crew to inspect the elevator, and I watched as they worked to fix the malfunctioning machinery. As I stood there, finally free from the confines of that dreadful elevator, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. I had made it through the long night, a night filled with uncertainty and fear, and I had emerged on the other side. The experience left me with a newfound appreciation for the simple things in life, the warmth of sunlight, the taste of a hot meal, and the comforting embrace of my own bed. It also reminded me of the strength of the human spirit, the ability to endure even the darkest of hours. I walked away from that night with a story to tell, a tale of isolation and survival. It was a night I would never forget, a night that had tested my limits and left me with a profound sense of resilience. And as I headed home, bathed in the morning light, I couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of gratitude for the precious gift of life.